So I'm just going to show you some of my ornamental grasses in one of my borders that I've called the Callum Agrostis Cal Forster border, or shortened it to the Cal Forster border. Now it's in what I call the longer border, which runs right up to the shack, which is way up the garden there. It's it doesn't continually run. It is subdivided by a path and a gate, a fence further up the garden. But this little section here is one section that I wanted to keep the Cal Forster in big amounts. Today's a good day to demonstrate this because it's nice and windy at the moment, so it's showing how delightful it can be. So that's Callum Agrostis acutiflora, and this goes through 3 different phases. Phase 1, it has tight formed seed heads. So let's try and find one that's not strictly tight, but is closer to the original. So, oh, it's blowing around quite well. So that there, if you can focus in on that, that's quite tight. And then what they do is they open up to this sort of thing. And this is a reddy purple tinge to it. Not so obvious on here, but it's reddy purple. And then once it's gone through this phase, opening up, it gets pollinated by the wind, which is brilliant today because it'll pollinate them a bit quicker. But the good thing is, they're sterile. So although they think they're being pollinated, they're not. They just won't come to anything because they're sterile. Now, phase 3 on these things is this. Now, this just happens to have grown like this immediately. From day one, this stalk grew up, this seed head grew up, never came to anything. And that is what they're actually all going to look like as autumn approaches. Well, in the next 2 months, they'll all of this plant will look like that, and they will go stiffer and stay upright. And they'll remain like that all the way through to next year, when in about the end of February, maybe even earlier nowadays, we'll be chopping them right back down to the ground, right back down, and the new growth will already be going up by then. Now, the annoying thing that they do sometimes is things like this. They drop these out to the side like that. The simple process of that is don't mess about with it. It's not going to re-stand up. Simply go down, snap it off. There's no point in trying to rescue that. It's never going to rescue. Experience has taught me that. When it rains, these will drop down to the ground, but they will quickly bounce back once they dry out. Now, the danger, although there's beauty in the wind blowing in these things, the danger is also that it does snap some of them off. Each one it snaps off, take out, remove it. It's not going to make a lot of difference if you've got such a quantity like this. Now, this border was always going to be just grass. I talked about taking this out earlier in the year in another video, this Euphorbia, which is Wolfenii, just a seedling. Just one I fancied putting in. And it does look good because it's an evergreen, and it looks good when there's nothing else in here, but because it's the only one, it does look a bit daft, so I'm thinking about putting another one where the dustbin is. I'll remove the dustbin, we'll reuse that in the same border, but in another part of it. Because I feed and water and bathe the birds in that, so that's worth having. But we will change it for a Euphorbia. Now, there are other grasses. There's in the background, let's try and get to it. There's Melica uniflora, which is a woodland one. If you've got a shady, dry section in your garden, but you want some grasses, not very big, but go for that one. It will self-seed. I put it in last year and it only had 2 leaves. This is a year on and it's clumping up nicely. And that one isn't sterile. That one will reproduce. Here we've got Melinia Pontdesay, beautiful grass. All Melinias are great grasses to have in your garden. If you want a good grass, just go for a Melinia. Now, the seed heads are coming out. And what they'll do is they'll push up, and this particular one will arch over. That's one of its failings. But the good thing about this one is all these stems will be dark olive to olive brown. And they look stunning. It's unusual for a Melinia to have this colour in it. That's why I keep it in here. Now, it's still in its 2nd year, so we're going to see how it performs this year. Hopefully it won't spoil itself by going into all the others. If it does, I'll remove it and we'll change it for something else. There are taller growing Melinias that won't cause the same problem. But we'll leave it there for now. This one is Deschampsia cespitosa Gold Tau, and it's one of my favourite ones. It's not grown up enough yet. It's still, the flower heads are still relatively short. They will get taller. They'll go up to about 2 foot and they'll sit quite good above it. Gold Tau means gold dew. And it really does look good, and it looks even better as it gets going, and as the seed heads dry, it looks superb. It is a self-seeder, so you must be wary of that. I'm not bothered too much. I'll select any good seedlings I find. Once you've got your eye in, you can pick out the good ones, and all the others I will just take out and throw away. So that's Deschampsia cespitosa Gold Tau, T-A-U, that last bit. Good one to have. There are others. I've got several in the garden in different borders. Now this one here, this is fast become my favourite. Now it's a shame the sun's not side lighting this, because this absolutely zings out. It's called Callum Agrostis Waldenbush. Now the thing with this one is it's a fresher, brighter leaf. It's got an open splayed habit, but only slightly open and splaying, as opposed to the tightly clumping Carl Forster. It does pretty much what Carl Forster does, wobbles about in the wind, as you can see, but not as effectively as Carl Forster. It's a bit stiffer, and that's quite obvious here. But it's an absolute superb one. It's becoming one of my new favourites. So if we show you here, you can see the two, how the wind's catching them and the difference in the way they actually move. So the Carl Forster, like a cornfield, whipping all over. Callum Agrostis Waldenbush, a little bit more stiffer, a bit more fishbone-like, I guess you could call that seed head, but it's stunning. It'll look good all year, and you won't be sorry that you got this one into your garden. With these, I've got a Miscanthus called China. And Miscanthus China makes about 2.5 to 3, maybe 4 foot maximum, and it has deep red flowers, or seed heads. It's a really good one. It's new in, as are all, none of these plants in this garden are more than 2 years in, because we've only been here 2 years. So it'll look really good once it's got established. Now it's been in a pot for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's been doing fantastic in the pot, but I've actually split half of it away and got some new pots going to produce more plants. Obviously, I've done a YouTube video on how to do that, how to split your Miscanthus. So this one is quite a sizable one to put back in, but I really wanted to put the whole thing in, but I decided to put half of it back in. Not looking massive at the moment, won't look massive this year, but it will produce seeds, and it should look pretty good by the end of the year. Now, this is Cortaderia, which is a pampas. So Cortaderia, and it's called Patagonia, and it has blue tones. Now, they're not always obvious on here. I keep saying this when I show this one. They're not very obvious on here. When the sun shines on them, you see more of the blue in, and it's a green blue really, but it's on the side of blue. Not as good as a blue fescue, but it nevertheless it still produces a nice coloured leaf. I've got it next to this sheep feeder, the sheep bale feeder. It's a design trick really, because the silvery colour of that sheep feeder matches in beautifully with this once the sun shines on it, and you can see they kind of associate well. Now up to now it's only produced 1 flower a year. This year it's produced 6. I was hoping for 7, because I like to work in 3s, 5s and 7s. It's a bit of an OCD thing with me, and this is the way people plant plants. But I like to see odd numbers on flower heads when there's very little of them, as there is with this. Now the beauty of this one is this flower head. It's a stunner. It's a kind of a red ochre, I guess you could call that, with undertones of golden buff. It's going to look even better once it starts coming out properly. So once that does start showing properly, I'll show you again. Now the other ones I've got in here is one called Miscanthus yakushimensis. Now it's another Miscanthus, and I tend to mass plant these ones because these are smaller. They don't grow massive. They get to about 2.5 foot, 3 foot maybe maximum, and they're very floriferous in the seed heads. They'll produce loads of seed heads, and that's what you really buy these things for the late season interest. Now, there's no such thing as a Yakushimensis. It's Yakujima. It's been reclassified some years back, but I keep this one as Yakushimensis because I bought it from somebody who at the time we had a bit of a jokey competition of who could sell the best plants or best grasses, and but he sadly passed away now, so I'm going to keep that in the memory of buying it from him. So that's Miscanthus sinensis Yakushimensis. Now, here's a good example of why you should plant at the right time. These were planted last year and allowed to do the thing. I also had this one and this one in at the same time, but decided at the back end of last year that I was going to remove them. There was too many of them. They weren't in the correct order. And as gardens develop, you must make changes. So I took them out, kept them in the pot, and then I was sat up the window thinking, you know what, I need to put 2 more in. So I put them back in. But the size of them, look at the size compared to the ones that were in already. Right, we've got the sun coming out now, so while we've got the sun coming out, let's take the opportunity to show you this when it's side lit from the sun. Look at that. That is just a stunner. I love it. That's the Callum Agrostis Waldenbush. Fantastic, and it's going to be looking good now right through into autumn, through winter, until spring when I shall have to chop it down, reluctantly chop it down, and the Cal Forster. They're all wobbling very well at the minute. I hope the wind don't get too high because, as I said, the Cal Forsters, the Callum Agrostis Cal Forster at the back there can snap a lot of seed heads, and it gets a bit annoying. Anyway, right, so I've recently bought Cecilia nitida, which is a real good landscaping plant, really. It's on the blue tones in the leaf, as well as you can see. And it clumps up, and you can put it in lots of plantings. So if you've got perennial plantings, this one will look really nice. And it's quite an early flowerer. Now, I bought this one because I've not had it before, really. Maybe I have in the past, I just don't remember. I collect a lot of grasses. And what I want it for is to do what I've just said, which is introduce it into borders, let it sit with some perennials, let's associate it. But the other good thing is, as I said, it's very early to flower, and it produces these kind of flower heads or seed heads. Let's try and hold it steady, see if it'll focus in. So there's nothing special about these seed heads. It's not really focusing, but anyway, that's what it produces. These seed heads, and it gets into quite a sizable clump, maybe a 1.5 foot in circumference and height. But that's worth having as well. Now, I know I've said that this is a grass border, but I've also got Persicaria blackfield here. That's a really good one. It's been moved, as has the Elianthus behind it. The Elianthus behind it is salicifolius, and that gets as tall as that there. It'll go right up there without a problem in a season. Now this year maybe not, because I had to move both these plants from the opposite border because they were on a slope, they were too dry. It was way too dry. Even though we're on a heavy soil here, a heavy chalk soil, they still require a little bit more moisture, and they weren't doing very well. But since I've put them here, the Elianthus has tripled, and so has the Persicaria. Now that rose against that mesh is Rosa Gertrude Jekyll, and it just keeps flowering its socks off. It's ready for deadheading, and I recommend you do deadhead regularly. I don't always have the time. I come out and I'll go through the whole lot in one go. And there's a lot in there to be taken out, so I shall get on with that later. Next to it is a geum that I was given, and I think this is totally Tangerine. It wasn't given to me with a name, but it's been flowering its socks off like last year and this year. Now that colour does it no favours whatsoever on the film, because it is definitely brighter than that in real life. Totally Tangerine. It's a sterile hybrid, which is why I think it's called Totally Tangerine, because it never stopped flowering, and that's kind of a giveaway. So we've got a Sanguine Sober in there. Sanguine Sober obtusa I was sold it as, but me and a friend, well, a friend doesn't think it is. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure. But we think it's something like Menziesii, something like that. But we'll leave it there for now. Now I've got my own Astrantia, which is Muriel's gift. I've got several of these. There's one over near the dustbin, over there. There's one here, and then there's another one there. And I want to get these going bigger. I want them to end up like this batch here. It's exactly the same one, but I want them to be as big as that. And in time they will be. So I've got the Opium Poppy, Papaver somniferum, growing in here. I never put them in. They've obviously already been in here. This is a border I actually created, so they're blown in from somewhere. And they're all over the place, but you've got to be very careful because they can just self-seed everywhere. I left this simply to see what the association with the grasses would look like. And it actually looks all right, doesn't it? It looks quite nice. But once that's flowered, produced its seed heads, I'll either remove the seed heads, snap them off and put them in some flower vase, or I'll just rip the whole plant up and just get rid of it, because I can nearly guarantee there'll be thousands of seeds around. And here's some others. I only cleared this less than a week and a half, 2 weeks ago I think it was, when I was last going through this border. And there we go, that's how quickly they grow. So you must keep on top of them. At the back I've got Panicum. This one here is called Panicum Stormcloud, and it's a good Panicum, this one. It gets quite tall, 4 foot. It gets more steely blue as it gets going. And it should do really well. It should do really well, and it shouldn't be long now before it gets fairly tall. And it just needs to settle in. Just needs a bit of time to settle in. But that's a good one. It's a Panicum Stormcloud. Here's another Panicum, more of a red tone. It's not looking very happy at the moment. That should be redder than that. It's because it's in more of a drier position, and they're not very keen on that. I've also got another Persicary called Robusta, and that's really nice. That's a good one. That's been flowering well all year. And in this sheep bale feeder we've got Euphorbia whistleberry garnet growing with this silver birch, which is Jacquemontii utilis, but it's multi-stemmed. It's doing really well. I recommend that if you're having borders with grasses and stuff in it, you try and put in trees, which I have done here. This is doing well. This will be really yellow. It's Fagus sylvatica Dowick Gold. There's also a Dowick Purple. I decided to go for gold because I've got a lot of purple shrubs and trees in this garden, and I needed more of a yellow one. So that's a really nice tree. Will become fairly tall, but will remain probably 6 foot wide, maybe a little bit more as it gets going, but it should be very, very nice indeed over time. Okay, so we'll take you to the bottom of this. Down the Callum Agrostis, the Cal Forster. We've got an aster here that's a species aster. I've stuck it in there just to keep us into control, because it can be a bit of a nuisance and spread everywhere. That should control it. This is for Anonia, the New York ironweed. It gets to about 8 or 9 foot. Purple domed flower on the top, good for the butterflies and the bees. Late season, very robust. Won't bend, won't break unless we get the severest of storms, and it should look good. Another Miscanthus here, Malapartus, if you can get hold of that one. You will get hold of that one, it's easy to get hold of. Coupled up with Verbena bonariensis. Now these look good. Verbena bonariensis look good in any border, but particularly in grass borders, they tend to look good. The annoying thing is, if the Callum Agrostis blows over like it is doing at the minute, it often hooks itself up on these things. So that can be a little bit annoying. The little bulb sticking above are alliums. That's called Summer Drummer. Again, I talked about taking these out as well because of the horrible leaves that they actually produce later on, as they're like sacrificial leaves. But they're doing okay now, and they're looking good, and they've got to where I wanted them to be, and this is how I'd always imagined them. And if you look across here, you can see other ones popping up. So actually I need to add more to it rather than take any out at all, because they are doing well. And what I really need to do is thicken out the Callum Agrostis. Now I can split the Callum Agrostis quite easily because it's sterile, it's not going to spread, so I could split them next year, early spring. Once the new growth starts, I can split them in half and start thickening up all this area, and make it completely like a cornfield. Some of these are smaller. This is a smaller one, but this is simply because it was put in at a different time. I can guarantee it's the same plant because I split them from the original plant many, many years ago, and I've continued to split, divide, and put them back in the gardens, places I've lived. So there you go. Hopefully that's helped you to get an insight into why I love grasses, why I love ornamental grasses, and why you should go and get some ornamental grasses and put them in. If you don't like them, then fair enough. But if you do like them, aim for the ones that I've just been talking about. I do have lots more, and I will do another video on the other varieties that I have. But these are a good variety to start with. Ta-da!